Welcome back to today's Deep Dive, your Essential Intelligence podcast. Today is Monday, July 29th, 2025. I know Mondays are not my favorite day of the week either, but we can make it a bit easier with today's Intelligence Digest. I promise you that yesterday was anything but a boring Sunday. I hope you're already following our new YouTube channel, Next Site Intelligence, and also on Spotify. Look us up, Deep Dive Intelligence Podcast. Make sure to follow us because we're about to, unpack some truly significant global shifts. Our insights today come from Next Site, a company dedicated to cutting-edge global intelligence. They've developed their own open-source intelligence platform, Site Connect, which is truly transforming how investigators globally access critical information. You can check them out and learn more at www.next-site.com. NextSite provides these incredibly detailed intelligence reports to its customers, customizing them to fit specific interests, giving them that crucial edge. This is a regular daily deep dive, and today we're peeling back the layers on the intelligence brief for Sunday, July 27, 2025.
Right. And before we jump into the specific events of the day, it's really crucial to understand how we assess the credibility and potential impact of the intelligence we're discussing. NextSite uses a robust system of classification flags. This helps you, our listener, gauge the reliability and confidence behind each piece of information. We rely on three key flags. First, there's the threat level, which uses a UK system with plus or minus modifiers. This ranges from low, meaning an attack is highly unlikely, all the way to critical, indicating an attack is, expected imminently. Then we have source reliability based on the Admiralty AF scale. A means the source is as solid as it gets completely reliable, while F means we simply cannot judge it, like an unverified rumor. And finally, information confidence is rated from 1 to 6. A 1 means the information is confirmed by independent sources, and a 6 foot means it cannot be judged. These flags are really the foundation for assessing the credibility and potential impact of every single intelligence nugget we discuss.
Excellent. So let's kick off with the executive summary, or as they say in intelligence, the BLUF bottom line upfront for Sunday, July 27, 2025. It was certainly a day of shifting geopolitical flashpoints. In North America and Europe, we saw a tenuous US-EU trade deal that, while averting an all-out trade war, still imposed a 15% tariff. Over in Asia, tensions were on the rise, with North Korea rejecting peace overtures and persistent shelling between Thailand and Cambodia. The Middle East continued to grapple with deepening humanitarian crises, from limited Israeli aid pauses in Gaza to Iranian executions, alongside a quiet energy pact between Syria and Saudi Arabia. Africa saw tragic accidents and ongoing insurgent violence, while Latin America contended with organized crime and persistent migration challenges. And across the Pacific, environmental protests, trade disputes, and defense alliances painted a complex picture. The overarching theme for the day globally remained the persistent climate-related disasters, underscoring a growing security threat across the board.
And tying into that executive summary, the report highlights three critical spotlight themes. First, trade wars reloaded. The U.S. tariff on EU imports, while preserving some transatlantic alliance, sets a precedent for managed trade, raising concerns about protectionism and potential inflation. This isn't just about tariffs. It's, about a new economic framework emerging.
Right.
Then we have humanitarian choke points. The limited aid in Gaza, juxtaposed with continued violence and repression in other regions, underscores a worrying narrowing of humanitarian space. This raises an important question. How much more can these systems bear? Finally, climate political crosswinds. Heat waves, floods, and protests driven by climate stressors are fueling social unrest, migration, and policy disputes, really showing how deeply intertwined these issues are with global stability.
That gives us a clear lens for today. Let's dive deeper, starting with North America. The big headline here is the US-EU trade deal imposes 15% tariff, averting broader trade war.
Okay, this information carries B2 flags. That indicates a high degree of certainty in the report, meaning the source is usually reliable and the information is probably true.
So President Trump and EU Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen struck a deal to place a 15% tariff on European imports, specifically to avoid those much steeper duties that have been threatened. The EU also pledged a massive $600 billion investment into U.S. industries and committed to buying more American energy and defense equipment. This agreement came after months of intense tariff threats aimed at preventing a damaging trade conflict, while also securing some political wins for both leaders ahead of upcoming elections. Now, financially, the euro actually rose against the dollar to $1.17, and European equities hit multi-week highs. But economists are already warning this 15% tariff could spark long-term inflationary pressures. This raises a crucial question. Is this deal truly averting a trade war or simply setting a new precedent for managed trade that could stifle global growth in the name of political expediency?
It's a fascinating balance act. And you saw that play out on social media. The public reaction was quite polarized. Some celebrated it as, vital political pragmatism, a necessary compromise to avoid an even worse scenario, while others fiercely condemned it as a capitulation to protectionism that would ultimately hurt consumers through higher prices. This points to a deeper societal skepticism about political motives versus economic realities.
Yeah, that disconnect. Okay, from the complex world of trade, we pivot to a far more somber reality here in North America with a chilling incident in Michigan. Terror charges planned after Michigan Walmart stabbings.
The flags here are C3. This means the source is fairly reliable, but there's possible speculation involved. It suggests that some details might be preliminary or still under investigation, especially concerning the motive, so caution is needed there.
Right. This incident involved a 42-year-old man who stabbed 11 people at a Walmart in Utica, Michigan. He's now facing terrorism charges. Investigators say he targeted shoppers randomly, wounding a dozen people, including children. The motive isn't entirely clear, but prosecutors believe ideology may be involved. While there was minimal direct market impact, this incident certainly underscores the ongoing security risks for retail environments and the unexpected vulnerabilities in everyday spaces.
And this incident, while geographically distinct, tragically underscores underlying societal tensions that are often exacerbated by the very climate stressors we're about to discuss, tying back to one of our spotlight themes.
Indeed. Speaking of climate, heat warnings across southern Canada.
This one carries B2 flags, meaning it's usually reliable and probably true, pretty standard meteorological reporting with high confidence.
Environment Canada issued heat warnings for southern Ontario and Quebec, predicting humidex values exceeding 42 degrees Celsius as a multi-day heat event intensified. Officials advised residents to stay hydrated and watch for heat-related illnesses. This unusual heat wave is, of course, being linked to climate change, and it carries a significant risk of heat stroke. The strain on power grids is notable, potentially leading to a surge in electricity prices. Online, Canadians were posting videos of their thermometers going over 40 degrees Celsius, lamenting the power grid strain, and there were significant calls for government action on climate change that really gained traction. It shows how climate events immediately translate into public pressure.
Definitely, you see that direct link.
Let's shift our gaze to Europe. Our first major story is a tragedy. German train derailment kills 3.
This news carries B2 flags. That indicates it's usually reliable and probably true. The information comes from established news organizations and authorities, so there's little doubt about the core event.
That's right. A passenger train derailed near Riedlingen in southwestern Germany, tragically killing at least 3 people and injuring dozens. There were about 100 people on board, and 2 carriages derailed around 6:07 p.m. local time. Investigations are underway, and heavy rain and a possible landslide are being considered as factors. What's particularly insightful here is that the source highlights a broader context. Passengers regularly criticize German public transport for outdated infrastructure, frequent delays, and, various technical problems. This tragedy then becomes a focal point for deeper systemic issues. On social media, survivors and witnesses shared images criticizing rail infrastructure maintenance, fueling widespread sympathy, but also demands for immediate safety reforms.
Understandably so. It touches a nerve when basic infrastructure is perceived as failing.
Sticking with Europe, let's revisit that big trade deal from the European perspective. Europe accepts least worst trade deal.
Again, we see B2 flags here, signifying usually reliable information that is probably true. This reflects consistent reporting on the EU's perspective post-deal.
European officials described the 15% tariff agreed upon with the U.S. as the least worst outcome, clearly indicating they felt they had few better options. Analysts, however, are cautioning that while it avoids a 30% tariff, it will still suppress economic growth and likely raise inflation, pushing the EU to diversify its trade quickly.
Right, buying time, basically.
Exactly. The EU's aim here is to shield key sectors while buying time to diversify supply chains. Despite economists' warnings of persistent inflation, European stocks did rally on the news, likely on relief that a deeper trade war was averted. However, the online sentiment among European farmers and exporters was marked by frustration, fearing lost competitiveness, and demanding clearer strategies for market diversification.
A real split reaction then, depending on who you asked.
For sure. Now, another stark reminder of climate impact. Heat wave causes 480 excess deaths in France.
This also carries B2 flags, making it usually reliable and probably true, given it's from a public health agency reporting official figures.
France's public health agency reported about 480 excess deaths during a July heat wave that impacted about a third of the country's departments, with temperatures soaring past 42 degrees Celsius. Experts are now calling for stronger climate adaptation policies, and this episode has definitely reignited the debate over government preparedness and climate change itself. The financial impacts include increased healthcare costs and potential insurance claims. The hashtag canicule trended on social media, with users sharing coping strategies and renewing calls for climate action. Younger users, in particular, criticized the government's response as inadequate, showcasing a generational divide in climate expectations.
That generational divide seems to be a recurring theme in climate discussions.
It really does. Okay, moving on to Asia, we start with North Korea rejects South Korean peace overture.
The flags for this report are C3. That means the source is fairly reliable, but the information is possibly true, with the crucial added context that this is state propaganda. This implies that while the statement itself is accurately reported, its underlying motivations and factual claims might be biased or unverified, aimed at internal or external messaging. You got to read between the lines.
That's a crucial distinction for understanding Pyongyang's posture. Kim Yo-jong, the powerful sister of Kim Jong-un, publicly dismissed South Korean President Lee Jae-myung's proposals for dialogue, calling them a great miscalculation, and flatly stating that nothing could reverse past consequences. This really underscores Pyongyang's continued hardline stance amid ongoing military drills, clearly signaling strength ahead of their anniversary events. Financially, this heightens the risk for Korean equities and shipping insurance due to increased geopolitical uncertainty.
Always does.
On social media, South Korean netizens expressed disappointment after Pyongyang's rejection, while predictably, North Korean state accounts hailed their leader's strength and resolve, highlighting the starkly different narratives at play.
Two completely different realities being projected.
Exactly. And a continuing flashpoint in Southeast Asia, Thailand-Cambodia border conflict continues despite talks.
Here we have B3 flags. It's usually reliable, but possibly true. The possibly true part suggests that while the core event, the ongoing conflict and talks, is solid, specific details might be less certain or subject to immediate change. It's just the nature of reporting on active border clashes.
Right. Thai Prime Minister Shraddha Thavisin and Cambodian leader Hun Manet had planned to meet in Kuala Lumpur to discuss escalating border clashes that have already killed over 30 people and displaced more than 200,000. Shelling continued even as these talks were being planned, with both sides blaming each other despite U.S. calls for a ceasefire. This conflict stems from a decades-old territorial dispute over demarcation lines. The financial impact is significant. Trade and tourism between the two countries are likely to suffer, and it poses a clear risk to regional stability. Online, both Thai and Cambodian citizens posted footage of artillery fire, and nationalists on both sides traded accusations, while peace activists urged intervention from ASEAN, revealing the deep emotional and political divides.
It's a situation that's been simmering for a long, long time.
Diving into the Middle East, our first story is Israel implements limited aid pauses in Gaza.
This information carries B2 flags, meaning it's usually reliable and probably true. This indicates that the report is well corroborated by multiple sources and widely accepted as fact.
Israel announced daily 10-hour tactical pauses to allow humanitarian aid into northern Gaza. However, aid groups are reporting that this corridor only permits about 100 trucks per day, which is far, far less than the estimated 600 required, tragically leaving civilians still starving.
Just a fraction of what's needed.
Exactly. Jordan and the UAE conducted some airdrops, but Gazans continue to face widespread famine and disease. This is happening under significant international pressure to address the starvation, while Israel simultaneously maintains military operations elsewhere. Online discussions were dominated by heart-wrenching videos of children suffering from malnutrition, and there were widespread calls for international intervention, highlighting the profound human cost.
It's an absolutely dire situation.
A troubling report from Iran. Iran executes dissidents accused of attacking infrastructure.
For this report, the flags are C3, meaning it's fairly reliable and possibly true. The possibly true part, especially in the context of human rights and state justice, highlights that information from closed regimes about such events can be difficult to independently verify. Allegations of coerced confessions are a serious concern here.
That's crucial context. Iran executed 2 members of the Mujahideen-e-Khalq, or MEK, who were accused of firing projectiles at civilian infrastructure. Human rights groups immediately stated that these men were denied fair trials and were tortured into confessions. This act really underscores Tehran's ongoing clampdown on dissent within the country. Financially, it's likely to worsen investor perception of Iran, though the direct market impact is minimal. The online reaction from the Iranian diaspora was one of condemnation, accusing the regime of hypocrisy, while predictably, pro-government accounts portrayed the men as terrorists, demonstrating the entrenched opposing narratives.
Again, those starkly opposing narratives common in these situations.
And shifting gears, a significant diplomatic and economic development. Syria and Saudi Arabia signed Energy Cooperation Pact.
This also has C3 flags, indicating it's fairly reliable and possibly true. While the agreement itself is likely real, the full scope or immediate impact might still be emerging. It reflects the ongoing normalization of diplomatic ties, but the trajectory is still a bit uncertain.
Got it. This was a comprehensive energy cooperation agreement covering everything from electricity and gas to renewable energy and technology transfer. It really signals a significant thaw in relations between the two nations after a decade of estrangement. The pact includes joint project development and ministerial visits, reflecting Riyadh's broader regional engagement efforts. Financially, this could lead to significant investment in Syria's war-damaged energy sector. Online, energy analysts speculated that this pact could potentially weaken Iran's regional influence, and Saudis debated whether investing in war-torn Syria was a wise move, highlighting the strategic calculations involved.
A lot of geopolitical chess pieces moving there.
Definitely. Turning our attention to Africa now, starting with a tragedy. Boat capsizes in Nigeria, 13 dead, dozens missing.
The flags here are C3, which indicates the information is fairly reliable and possibly true. This is common for initial reports of accidents in regions where immediate, independent verification might be challenging. Details can shift.
A wooden boat carrying around 100 passengers on the River Niger tragically capsized, killing at least 13 people and leaving dozens missing. Officials suspect overloading was the cause, and rescue operations were actually paused for traditional mourning rituals. This follows a pattern of similar accidents in Nigeria, often attributed to lax safety standards and poor enforcement of regulations. On social media, Nigerians expressed widespread anger over these recurring boat disasters and demanded strict enforcement of safety regulations to prevent future tragedies, pointing to a systemic failure.
It highlights a real need for systemic change and safety oversight.
Another grim report. Islamic State-affiliated rebels kill 38 in DR Congo church attack.
This event carries B3 flags. It's usually reliable, but possibly true. The possibly true nuance reflects the difficulty of getting immediate, perfectly verified ground intelligence in active conflict zones, even with reliable primary reports. The core event is likely accurate, but details might evolve.
Understood. Allied Democratic Forces rebels, who are linked to the Islamic State, attacked a church in Komanda village in eastern DR Congo, killing 38 people and injuring 15. Survivors reported the rebels used machetes and guns in the assault. This attack highlights the ongoing insurgency in the resource-rich Ituri region, clearly a demonstration of the Islamist insurgency's power and continued threat. Financially, it could disrupt local mining operations and raise concerns for investors in the region. Congolese activists online mourned the victims and called for greater international support against the ADF insurgency, emphasizing the desperate need for security.
The human cost in these conflicts is just immense, and the economic ripple effects are significant too.
Moving to Latin America, our first story touches on the economy. Costa Rica seeks new air routes amid tourism slump.
This report has B2 flags, indicating it's usually reliable and probably true. Economic data and governmental actions like these are generally well-documented and verifiable.
Costa Rica is facing a noticeable challenge. A 2.8% year-on-year decline in European tourist arrivals in the first half of 2025 compared to 2024. In response, Costa Rica's tourism board is actively negotiating new direct flights to major European cities and heavily promoting the country in South America. Canadian Porter Airlines is even starting direct flights from Toronto and Ottawa in December. This slump is a big deal because tourism accounts for roughly 8% of Costa Rica's GDP. What's concerning is that this decline is happening even as global tourism trends show a 5% increase in international air travelers in Q1 2025.
So they're lagging behind the global recovery trend.
Exactly. It suggests Costa Rica isn't riding the global wave. Local businesses online expressed hope for a turnaround, while travel influencers promoted the new routes, trying to re-energize interest.
They'll need those new routes to pan out.
And in a stark contrast, another story from Costa Rica. Costa Rica seizes 810 kilograms of cocaine at Moline terminal.
This report also has B2 flags. Again, usually reliable and probably true. Large drug seizures are typically well documented by authorities and confirmed by multiple reports.
Costa Rican authorities intercepted a massive 810 kilograms of cocaine, cleverly hidden in manana boxes, at the Moline container terminal. This was part of Operation Soberania, using advanced scanning technology and canine units. To give you some context, the country has seized an astonishing 27 tons of cocaine in 2024 alone.
27 tons, wow.
It's huge. The Atlantic province of Lemoine, where the seizure happened, suffers one of the highest homicide rates in the country, largely due to cartel activity, indicating significant economic vulnerability and a rising need for security spending. Costa Ricans online applauded the seizure, but many also expressed deep worry about the ongoing gang violence, with some questioning whether corruption would ultimately undermine these efforts, highlighting a persistent tension between law enforcement success and underlying systemic issues.
That's the constant battle, isn't it? Enforcement versus the root causes.
Finally, let's look at Oceania and the Pacific region. First up, New Zealand farmers protest pine plantations for carbon offsets.
The flags for this are B2. Meaning it's usually reliable and probably true. This is a well-reported social and political movement with clear public statements and actions.
Sheep farmers in New Zealand launched a Save Our Sheep campaign, protesting the conversion of their pasture land into pine forests for carbon offset projects. They argue that the government's incentive scheme is driving up land prices and actively undermining traditional livestock farming. In response, the government has imposed a moratorium on new carbon offset projects and pledged to reform the policy. Financially, this impacts land prices and could lead to long-term shifts in the carbon credit market. Online, farmers shared photos of pasture land threatened by these pine forests, while environmentalists debated whether carbon offsets truly justify such significant land conversion, exposing the complex trade-offs in climate policy.
It's a classic environment versus economy versus traditional livelihoods conflict. Really complex.
And a major geopolitical move. UK and Australia deepen 50-year AUKUS submarine partnership.
This report also has B2 flags, making it usually reliable and probably true. High-level international agreements like this are typically well documented and widely confirmed by official sources.
The UK and Australia have signed a landmark 50-year security treaty within the AUKUS framework, which enables the joint development of nuclear-powered submarines. This pact is expected to generate a whopping $20 billion in exports and create 21,000 jobs. While U.S. officials stated that President Trump would review the agreement, it clearly reinforces defense cooperation in the Indo-Pacific, primarily aimed at countering China's naval expansion and strengthening allied capabilities in the region.
A very significant long-term commitment.
Online, Australians and Brits debated the merits of the deal. Some viewed it as a crucial step in strengthening security, while others feared it could lead to increased tensions with China, revealing the differing strategic perspectives.
Again, splits in public opinion on major strategic shifts.
Okay, let's unpack this. Expert, how do these regional events truly connect, and what are the broader implications for our listener? This wasn't just a list of headlines, was it?
Absolutely not. What's fascinating here is how these seemingly disparate events weave together. If we look at North America and Europe, the US-EU trade deal certainly boosted the euro and European equities. However, bond yields rose on inflation fears. The hidden agenda, as the report points out, is often about securing political wins ahead of elections while shielding domestic industries. So the implication for you is to monitor European inflation and ECB policy very closely. If inflation expectations start rising above 3%, you might need to adjust your exposure to European equities. That's a Tier 1 concern, something to act on quickly.
Right, Tier 1. Got it.
In Asia, North Korea's rejection of dialogue and the persistent Southeast Asian border clashes haven't spooked global markets yet, but they certainly increase geopolitical risk premiums. This raises an important question. How volatile could things become if these simmer for too long? You should watch Korean and Thai credit default swaps. A spike there could signal an escalating conflict, which is a Tier 2 implication, meaning you should be monitoring for potential impact.
Okay, Tier 2 watch item.
In the Middle East, Israel's limited aid corridor offers very little relief for Gazans, and Australia's condemnation adds diplomatic pressure. Energy markets remain sensitive to any instability in the region, with Brent crude rising slightly due to concerns of a broader conflict. The implication here is to hedge your energy exposure. If Brent crosses $90 a barrel, prepare for inflationary spillover across other sectors, making this a Tier 1 concern.
Another Tier 1. Energy's always sensitive.
Moving to Africa, the insurgent violence in DR Congo directly threatens mining operations. This means cobalt and copper prices could spike if those attacks intensify. For investors, the implication is to monitor production disruptions and consider diversifying supply chains, a Tier 2 action.
Tier 2. Supply chain risk. Makes sense.
In Latin America, Costa Rica's tourism decline and those massive cocaine seizures highlight significant economic and security challenges. Currency volatility may increase if tourism revenues continue to fall. So watch the Costa Rican colon exchange rates and tourism statistics. A sustained decline in arrivals signals economic stress, which is a Tier 3 implication, meaning it's a longer-term trend to watch.
Tier 3, longer horizon watch.
And in Oceania Pacific, New Zealand's forestry protests and Australia's trade policy both emphasize the tension between climate policy and economic interests. Carbon credit prices may become more volatile, and defense spending under the Kyoto Agreement could actually boost aerospace stocks. Evaluating investments in carbon markets and defense contractors would be a Tier 3 implication.
So if we pull back even further, expert, what are the truly global correlations we should be seeing? How do these all fit into the bigger picture?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we see significant global correlations. First, climate-linked disasters and economic pressure. The heat waves in Europe and North America, floods in West Africa, and protests in New Zealand clearly illustrate how climate events disrupt economies, strain public health systems, and fuel social unrest. These can catalyze policy changes affecting critical sectors like energy, agriculture, and insurance. The implication is to advocate for resilient infrastructure investments and closely track climate legislation. This is a Tier 1 global correlation impacting everyone.
Tier 1 global. Second, humanitarian crises and market sentiment. The continued violence and starvation in Gaza, coupled with Iranian executions and Latin American migration pressures, are eroding investor confidence. These situations could trigger sanctions or significant aid reallocations. For you, this means reducing exposure to sovereign entities with worsening humanitarian reputations and monitoring closely for any sanctions announcements. This is a Tier 2 global correlation requiring vigilance.
Tier 2 global reputational risk and sanctions.
And finally, security alliances and geopolitical hedging. The AUKUS submarine deal and the Syria-Saudi energy pact highlight shifting alliances and a new geopolitical landscape. Investors may need to adjust portfolios to favor defense and energy sectors while pricing in regional risk. Track defense procurement contracts and energy project announcements. This is a Tier 3 global correlation influencing long-term strategic decisions. Tier 3 global, the big strategic shift. Okay, so what does all this mean for you, our informed listener, as you navigate your week?
Well, this raises an important question. When we look at the Daily Intelligence Digest, we see a world of interconnected events. From trade deals impacting your grocery bill, to climate events changing landscape and livelihoods, and security shifts affecting global stability. The challenge isn't just knowing the facts, but understanding how they ripple through our lives. Consider this. How might the seemingly disparate events of a train derailment in Germany and a tourism slump in Costa Rica both reflect a deeper global fragility to unpredictable environmental shifts and economic vulnerabilities? What responsibilities do we, as informed citizens, have in demanding more resilient systems, whether it's infrastructure or humanitarian aid?
That's a powerful thought to leave you with. Do not forget to follow us on YouTube and Spotify. Also, like, share, and comment. We do look forward to hearing your opinion. This is it for today. Enjoy your start of the week.